This week's Parsha is Parshas Bamidbar. The Pasuk in Perek Gimel, Pasuk Dalet says, Vayamos Nadav v'Avihu lifnei Hashem, Nadav and Avihu died, V'akriva meizor lifnei Hashem b'Midbar Sinai, Uvanim lehayu lahem, Vayichahen Elazar Isamar al pnei Aaron Aviyam. Elazar and Isamar became Kohanim al pnei Aaron Aviyam, on the face of Aaron their father. So Zakt Rashi says, what does that mean? B'chayav, in his lifetime. So the Pasuk Shad in Rashi is, what does it mean b'chayav, that they became Kohanim in his lifetime? Of course they did. So the Pasuk Shad in Rashi is that Elazar and Isamar became Kohanim Gedolim in his life. So, and if you look at the Ibn Ezra in Pasuk Gimel, the Ibn Ezra, on the words, the Pasuk says, Eila Shmois B'nei Aaron HaKohanim HaMeshuchim, that these are the names of B'nei Aaron HaKohanim that were Mashuach. Zok, the Ibn Ezra, B'Shemen HaMishcha, Shehayu Kohanim Gedolim, that they were Kohanim Gedolim. So, the Pasuk Shad in Rashi and from the Ibn Ezra, it sounds like that the Bnei Aaron, Elazar Isamar, really Nadav and Avihu also were all Kohanim Gedolim. L'maisa, you have to know, because the psukim in Parshas Tetzaveh and in Parshas Tzav are all mashma that the Bnei Aaron only wore daled begadim. They only wore 4 begadim. If they were Kohanim Gedolim, l'chayra they have to wear shmeina begadim. They have to wear everything, the me'il, the me'il, the tzitz. So why is the Pasuk Shad in the psukim mashma that they only wore daled begadim? That's one kasha. Another kasha is that the Rambam in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, Perek Dalet Halachot Azvav, says, Mefurish, Ein memanim shnei Kohanim Gedolim ka'achas. You can't have 2 Kohanim Gedolim at once. So it sounds like that you're not allowed to ever have 2 Kohanim Gedolim at the same time. So what's going on? That's noch a kasha. V'oid, I had shver like this. There's a Sepharnai in Parshas Emor. Amazing Sepharnai. Chiddush Nifla. The Pasuk says in Parshas Emor, Perek Chav Daled, Pasuk Gimel, when it's talking about the menorah, it says, Michutz l'pareichas ha'edus ba'ayil mayed yarech oisei Aaron. Aaron should set it up. May Ervad Baiker Lifnei Hashem Tamid Chukas Eilam L'Doyrei Seichem. So it was bothering me when I learned Parshas Emor. Why does it say Yarech say Aaron? Why Aaron? L'chayra Aaron Ubanav are kosher for even a Kohen Hedyot is a lot of light the menorah. It's loved after Kohen Gadol. So Zakta Sfarnai. He asks the kasha that by the Ketairos also it says Aaron, even though Ketairos is avada kosher by Kohen Hedyot. So he says, because Kol Yemei HaMidbar Haya Inyan HaMishkan B'chol Yom Ke'inyanei L'Dairos B'Yom HaKippurim. All the days of that Klal Yisrael were in the Midbar, every day for all 40 years, it was like Yom Kippur. Why? Because on Yom Kippur, what's the pshat? That only a Kohen Gadol is allowed to go in, because it says, Kiba Ana Neira Lakapayas, because the Eibishter is there, the Shechina is there. So he says, Kol Yemei HaMidbar, it says, Ki Anan Hashem ala Mishkan Yaimam ve'esh Tia Laila Bay. So he says, Oy Bazei, it had to be Aaron only who did the Avodah, who did the menorah and the Ketairos for 40 years every day, because every day he says, Nasim al Yedei Kohen Gadol k'moshe Nasim l'Dairos b'Yom HaKippurim. Amazing chiddush of the Sfarnai that only Aaron was allowed to do the menorah and the Ketairos for 40 years every single day, because every day was like Yom Kippur. Why? Because the Eibishter was there, the Shechina was there on the Mishkan. And that's the reason why a Kohen Gadol is only allowed to go into the Mishkan on Yom Kippur, because the Eibishter comes, Kiba Anan Eira Lakapayas. So, Oibazeh was bothering me. If Elazar and Isamar were Kohanim Gedolim, if they were also Kohanim Gedolim, so then what's the Sfarnai saying that only Aaron could do it? L'chayra, Elazar and Isamar were also Kohanim Gedolim. They could also do it. So that's a third kasha. So to be miyashiv this, I started looking around, and it's a ganze shmuz. It's a huge shaila. What was Elazar Isamar? Were they Kohanim Gedolim? Were they Kohanim Hadyatim? So I'm going to bring a few rayas, and we're going to tell a little bit on a few of the rayas. The Gemara in Zvachim, Kof Aleph Amud Aleph. The Gemara is handling the Maisa that happened, that the carbon was burnt, and Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to figure out why was the carbon on the 8th day of the Miluim, why was it burnt? And Moshe said, maybe you brought it when you were Einin, because it was the day that Nadav and Avihu died. And Moshe asked Aaron, V'dilma ba'aninus akrivasua upaslasua. Maybe you brought it when you were Einin. So Amar Loi, what did Aaron answer Moshe? V'chihem hikrivu. Were my sons makriv? Ani crafty. It was me. What's the Havana in this? Zok Rashi. Moshe heini krivu b'tmiya v'chibanai shehem ed yoitim shimshu hayom. And my sons that are hadyatim did the avodah. V'lo yalai hitalta kol avodah. V'ani kayin gadol ani u'makiv einin. I'm a kayin gadol. So what do you see from this Gemara? Klor. The way how Rashi is being masber. You see that Aaron was saying to Moshe, my sons who are hadyatim, who they're not allowed to do avodah when they're einin, they weren't the ones that were makiv the carbon. Ich have given makrib the carbon, and I'm a kain gadol, and I'm allowed to be makrib einin. So that's not why it was burnt. So you see, Klor from this Rashi that Elazar Isamar had a din of a kain hadyat. And if you look at the Gemara in Zvachim, another raya, the Gemara in Zvachim daf kuf beis amud aleph, the Gemara says, Chamesh simchas haisa Elisheva Yisrael al b'nei Yisrael. There were 5 simchas that Elisheva, the wife of Aaron, was more on all other Bnei Yisrael. What are the 5? Yevama Melech, her Yevama, if she would have needed, was a Melech. Who's that? Moshe Rabbeinu. Isha Kayin Gadol, her husband's a Kayin Gadol. Bina Skan, her son was a Skan. Ben Bina Mashuach Melchama, her grandson was a Kayin Mashuach Melchama. Ve'achel Nasi, and her brother was a Nasi. But what do we see? We see Bina Skan, that only one of her sons was a Skan. Elazar, he was a Skan Kain Gadol. But Isamar Avada, it sounds like from that Gemara, Isamar was just a Kain Hadyat, a regular Kain Hadyat. So there's the 2 Gemaras in Zvachim that sound like that Elazar and Isamar were just regular Kain Hadyat. And Rashi in Parshas Kairach famously brings a medrash that when Moshe Rabbeinu told Adas Kairach, the 250 people, to bring a machtais, and come and burn it lifnei Hashem, so Zok Rashi in Parshas Kairach, Perek Tezayin Pasuk Vav, Ma'ra loymar lahem kach. Why did Moshe tell these 250 men to bring the machtais? Amar lahem, so he told them. By the Goyim, there's a lot of priests, there's a lot of different things. Anu, ein lanu ela Hashem echad, arayin echad, v'tayra achas, umizbeach echad, v'kayin gadol echad. We only have one kayin gadol. So Rashi is bringing this from a Tanchuma, and it sounds Klor that there was only one Kain Gadol, Aaron HaKayin, but Elazar and Isamar Avada were not Kohanim Gedolim. Those are 3 rayas that we have, that Elazar and Isamar were just regular Kohanim Hadyatim. But from Le'idach Gisa, we have rayas Mamish Fakert. First of all, there's the Bamidbar Rabbah, Parsha Beis, Ois Chavav, that says Klor, that they were Kohanim Gedolim. Why? Because the Medrash says, like Rashi says, Yitzchak Amar B'chayav, And the Medrash says, Al daite de Reb Yitzchak duhu Amar b'chayev, al das Reb Yitzchak, that he says that Elazar and Isamar were b'chayev. What does that mean? Ira tuma ba'aron, if there was a tuma by Aaron HaKohen, shimesh Elazar. Elazar became Kohen Gadol. Ira tuma ba'Elazar, if there was a tuma by Elazar, shimesh Isamar. Isamar took over. So the Medrash Mefurish is saying that Elazar and Isamar were Kohanim Gedolim. They were Meshamish even B'chayav. And that's like we said, but the Pashup Shad and Rashi is that they were Meshamish B'chayav. If you look at the Ramban, I want to still do something, a little agav, but it's kedai to hear this Ramban. The Ramban, in Perek Chof Aleph, Pasuk Yud Zayin, he says, when it's talking about the Mumin for Kohanim, it says, Dabel Aaron Lemor, speak to Aaron, Ish mizar acha l'dayraisa masher yiyah baymum. A man from your children, l'dayris, that has a mum. So the Ramban is bothered. Why does it say Ish mizar acha? Why isn't it refer to Aaron Alain? Zok the Ramban says, V'lo yirtze lahazir's Aaron atzmei b'teris hamumin. It didn't talk, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't talk to Aaron about the mumin that passel a kayin, right? Whatever the mumin are, if he's blind, iver, piseach, if he's limp. What's the pshat? Ki Aaron Kadosh Hashem. Aaron is a Kadosh Hashem. Kula Yafe. Umum Ein Bay. Aaron is beautiful. Mum Ein Bay. He's not going to have a mum. And he says the same thing by Tzaras and the Zoiv. When it's referring to the Kohanim. About Tzaras, it says, Ish mizera Aaron. Why not Aaron? Why only the children of Aaron? He says, Ki lo yera ze begufay. Aaron HaKohen Chas v'Shalom would never have this. Ki Malach Hashem tzivakeisu. Aaron HaKohen was a Malach Hashem. It's a Pia Pasuk in Malachi. But over there he says, Teich Dvarav, he says, Ube Parshas HaTumah B'Samuch. But when it refers to the Tumah by the Kohanim, it says, Daber al Aaron vel Banav. Why over there is Aaron included? So the Ramban says, Ki yitochen shegam ba'Aaron yera tumas hamaga b'meisei b'sheretz. Because it's possible that Aaron would become tamei with tumas meis or a sheretz touching him. That it is possible to happen by Aaron. For Aaron to have a mum or for Aaron to become a mitzayra or a zav chas v'shalom, it can't be. And that's why the Eibishter only said mizera Aaron. But for Aaron to become tamei, avada Aaron could become tamei if he touches a mace or he touches a sheretz. So that's why I wanted to start to this medrash, that the medrash says, Ira Tuma ba'Aaron, that's shaykh. It's shaykh for Aaron to become tamei. But Lamaisa, you see from this medrash, l'chayra, that Aaron, that Elazar and Isamar were Kohanim Gedolim, and they were Meshamish b'chaye Aaron, that even when Aaron was alive, they were Meshamish, because when a Tumah happened. There's another Medrash Rabbah in Vayikra, Parshas Achrimos, Parsha Chaf Ois Tes. The Medrash says, the Medrash is going through, why were Nadav and Avihu, why were they nifter? What was their chait? Zog the Medrash, with the second pshat, says, Val Yedei Shahayu Mechusari Begadim. They were Ovid Avaida, missing a beged. What is that beged? Umehayu chaserin. What were they missing? Me'il. They were missing the me'il. Shekasiv by Misa shenemar v'haya al Aaron l'sharis. This medrash. What do you mean? They was missing the me'il. What does Nadav and Avihu have to do with the me'il? They were Kohanim Edyatim. Why are they wearing the me'il? Sounds like from this medrash, Klar, that Avada they were Kohanim Gedolim. And the Medrash over there, right afterwards in Ois Yud, says another chait that says that a famous shtickle that Nadav and Avihu said that Masai, when are Aaron and Moshe going to die and we're going to take over? The Medrash says, Anu shnei skane kahuna. We are the two skan kohanim. So this klor sounds like not like the Gemara in Zvachim and the Zvachim Kuf Beis, that there was only one skan of kahuna. It sounds like Nadav and Avihu were both skan, and they were Kohanim Gedolim. And so that's a couple rayas that they were Kohanim Gedolim. Lemaisa, the whole parsha of Misas Nadav and Avihu is mashma that they were Kohanim Gedolim. What are the rayas? The rayas are that in Parshas Shmini, Parak Yud, Pasuk Aleph, the Pasuk says, Vayikra Moshe el Mishol vel Tzafan b'nei Uziel daid Aaron vayemer aleim. Moshe Rabbeinu called Mishol and el Tzafan to come and take out Nadav and Avihu's bodies. So the Teres Kohanim learns out from here, Itmar b'Teres Kohanim, Mikan she'ena Kohanim mitamen l'meisim. You see from here that Kohanim can't be mitamen l'meisim. Now, what do you mean? Yeah, we know. First of all, it's a mefurish pasuk that they shouldn't be mitamen l'meisim. But over here was their brothers. Elazar and Isamar they were Nadav and Avihu's brothers. Avada Kohen Hedyot is allowed to be mitamen to his brother. That's one of the cravim that he's allowed to be mitamen for. So why would the Teres Kohanim say that Elazar and Isamar could not be mitamen, and that's why Moshe had to call Mishal vel Tzafan? What do you mean? They're Kohanim Adyatim. They're allowed to be mitamen. Sounds like again they were Kohen Gadol. And then Moshe Rabbeinu says to Elazar and Isamar, he says, "Rashechem al tifro, b'gdeichem lo yisafreimu." Right, you're not allowed to grow your hair, and you're not allowed to rip your begadim. This is only an isser for a Kohen Gadol. A Kohen Hedyot does not have these isurim. And then Moshe ends off, Umi Pesach oyel moyed lo seitzu pentamusu ki shemen mishchas Hashem aleichem, that you're not allowed to go out of the Pesach oyel moyed. That's only an isser for a Kohen Gadol. A Kohen Hedyot does not have these isurim. So the whole parsha of Nadav and Avihu, the Misas Nadav and Avihu, is mashma that Elazar and Isamar were Kohanim Gedolim. So we have a few rayas that they were Kohanim Gedolim. We have a few rayas that they were Kohanim Hadyatim. So a couple of zachin on the medrash that says that Nadav and Avihu died because they were mechusar begadim, because they weren't wearing the me'il. So the Rosh in Tshuva was already asked this question. Klal Yud Gimel Eis Chaf Beis Zak the Rosh Umasha Sha'alta Hada Amar Reb Levi Me'il Hayu Chasein V'aloi Me'il Humi Bigdei Kohen Gadol. Zak the Rosh. Somebody asked him that L'chayra the Me'il has been Bigdei Kohen Gadol. So why is over here? Why are we saying that they were mechusar begadim if it's been Bigdei Kohen Gadol? Nadav and Avihu were not Bigdei Kohen Gadol. So he brings the Gemara in Zvachim Kuf Beis Amud Aleph that says that one of Elisheva's sons was a skan. And he says, maybe you're going to say that's not such a good teretz because a skan is only once you're mishamish as a Kohen Gadol, then you're mechayev, then you become a Kohen Gadol. But before that, you're avadi, you're not a Kohen Gadol. And he says that would only answer Nadav, one skan. But what about Avihu? So Zak the Rosh, a teretz, that since lefi them, they were the ones who were bringing teretz lefnai v'lefnim. So lefi Nadav and Avihu's minds, they were the ones bringing keteretz lefnai v'lefnim, which only a Kohen Gadol is allowed to do. So lefi their das, they had to be Kohen Gadols. So they had to wear all the shmeina begadim. So memela, that's why they were punished for not wearing the me'il. So the Rosh's teretz, the Achronim say, is a big daichik. The Yedei Moshe on the side of the Medrash says it's a big daichik. And Lamaisa, I looked in the Psukim in Parshas Tetzaveh where the original tzivui of the Big Day Kahuna were, and the Psukim were mashma to me that the even for the sons, for Aaron's sons, they had to wear all Shemaina Begadim. Why? Because the pasuk in Perek Ches pasuk Dalid, ve'ela begadim asher yasu chayshin beifed u'miluk soinas tashbeis mitznevez va'avneit. These are things that the Kohen Gadol wears. Va'asu bigdei kodesh la'aron achicha u'levanav l'cha noili. So it sounds like that all these begadim were for Aaron and his sons. And the pasuk at the end of the parsha says, "V'halbashta oisam es Aaron achicha v'es banav itai." It sounds like you're putting on the same thing, that Aaron and his sons were wearing the same thing. So that's what I looked. And Acher Kach Matzasi, that on the side of the Medrash, in the Vilna Medrash, there's a Perish Marzu that says, Mamish this, Mefurish. He says that you could be Medayik in the Psukim in Parshas Tetzaveh, that sounds like that Nadav, Avihu, Elazar Isamar had to wear Shemaina Begadim, and he says it was for all 8 days of the Shemaina Simei Amaluim. The Pashup Pshat in the Psukim are that they had to wear, for the Shemaina Simei Amaluim, they had to wear Shemaina Begadim. That's the Pshat in the Psukim in Parshas Tetzaveh. So he says that's the Pshat. You want to know why was Nadav and Avihu punished for not wearing a Me'il, like the Medrash says, is because for those 8 days they were Kohanim Gedolim, and they had to wear Shemaina Begadim. But this pshat is very shver, and he brings himself. He says Rashi Beferish says in Parshas Tetzaveh Perek Ches pasuk Mem Aleph on the pasuk V'Hilbashta Oisam Es Aaron Achicha V'Ezbanav Zakt Rashi, which clothing should they wear? The clothing Aaron should wear what's right to him. V'Ezbanav should wear what's right to him. Oisam Aksuvim Bahem. Rashi already bavarn this. Rashi said that Avada, Nadav and Avihu didn't wear the Shemaina Begadim. All the pasuk was saying was V'es Banav, that they should wear what's right to them. Rashi doesn't say anything about the first pasuk, which is L'chayr Mashma Mamish, that they wore the Shemaina Begadim. But Rashi Klor wasn't learning like this, that they had to wear the Shemaina Begadim. So and V'oid, it's in Parshas Sav, it's Mefurish Klor that they only wore Daled Begadim. So l'chayr this pshat from the Perish Marzu is very shver. So the Rishonim b'signain echad kema not all of the Rishonim, but a lot of the Mefarshei Chumash in Parshas Shmini, they say a different mahalach. What do they say? The Das Kanim Bereishim says that the Havana is that Kohanim had yoitim b'yoy mishchasam she'ein metamin l'krevim sheyesh lahem din Kohanim Gedolim. They have a din of a Kohen Gadol on the day that they're getting the Shemen HaMishcha on their head. When was that day? That day was the 8th day of the Yimei HaMiluim, that Nadav and Avihu Elazar Isamar got the Shemen HaMishcha. And he says, the Das Kanim brings that's the Bechar Shor says, that's why it says, Roshechem al Tifro, B'gdeichem al Tifreimu. We said the whole Parsha is mashma, that they were Kohanim Gedolim. The whole Parsha, because Moshe said you're not allowed to do things that only the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to do. What's the pshat? Because on the day that they got the Shemen HaMishcha, that day, Avada, they were not, they had a din of a Kohen Gadol. And the Cheskuni says the same thing. The Cheskuni says, Afal pisha atem hedyotis, even though you are hedyotis, hare atem hayoim ki Kohen Gadol adaris. Only this day, only the day of when the Shemen HaMishcha is being put on their head. And the Rashbam goes with this mahalach. So a lot of the Rishonim go with this mahalach, that the day they got the Shemen HaMishcha put on their head, that's the day they were in Kohen Gadol. But Avada the Shivas Yimei HaMiluim, they only wore the Daled Begadim, like it's mashma in Parshas Sav. But on the day, the 8th day, it could be that day is when they wore Shemaina Begadim. They had a din of a Kohen Gadol, and that's why Moshe Rabbeinu said, You're not allowed. That's why he asked Mishola and Tzafan to be Metame, because Elazar Isamar could not be Metame because they had a din of a Kohen Gadol. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu told them the different Isurim that only a Kohen Gadol is allowed to have, that only a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to do. And that's Pshat in Teres Kohanim, Mikan She'ena Kohanim Metame L'Meisim. What do you mean Kohanim can't be Metame L'Meisim? Kohanim Adiyaitim could. No, the Teres Kohanim is saying that on the day that you get Shemin HaMishcha on your head, you are a din like a Kohen Gadol. So that's to the Mahalach in this Medrash. L'maisa, Reb Chaim in Sefer, I was mamish excited when I saw this Reb Chaim. He mamish talks about this Inyan. He's referring to the Isser of Umi Pesach Oil Moed Loi Seitzu, that you're not allowed to go out of the Pesach Oil Moed. And there's a Machlekes Rambam Ravid. And the Ravid uses a Loshen. The Ravid, when he's masig on the Rambam says it's for a Kohen Gadol and a Kohen Hedyot. Zokt, the Ravid, Shaloi Nemar Oiser Pasuk Ela La'oisa Shah B'Shvil Shenimshechu. It only said it for that time because they had Shemin HaMishcha. So Pashup Shah would sound like all the other Rishonim, that day they had Shemin HaMishcha, they were Kohanim Gedolim, so they weren't allowed to leave. That's the Pashup Shah and what the Ravid is saying, just like the Das Kainim, just like the Chizkuni, just like the Rashbam. Zok Chaim, no. He asks as a kasha, he says, V'kasha v'chi nimshechu mai havi. Who cares that they had Shemin HaMishcha? V'chi hayu Kohen Gadol, were they Kohen Gadol? V'aloi shimshu b'dalad b'gadim. They were only mishamish b'dalad b'gadim, v'afilu b'shas miluim. He says, even during the miluim, mavur b'parsha de shimshu b'dalad b'gadim. And he says, the Gemara in Yuma Daf Hey handles Ketzad Hilbisham, how did you dress them? Right? That din was only when did Moshe Rabbeinu dress them? That was only at that time, B'shas HaMiluim, but L'Darius, every Kohen dresses himself. And he says, V'chein Revur L'Hedya B'zvachim Daf Kaf Aleph, right? That they were also to be Ovid that day because they were Einin. So he says, Hari L'Hedya Deloy Hayu Kohen Gadol. They were not. So he says, so what's the pshat? So he says that he says it's a din. This is a brisker word, that it's a din. If you have Mashiach, the din of Umi Pesach Beisai Laiseitzu is a din that if you have Mashiach, you're not allowed to go out of the Azara. That is what Reb Chaim says. So Reb Chaim takes one of the rayas from Zvachim Kafalef, and he says there's no way they were Kohen Gadol. And he says, the Ravid says it was B'shvil Shenimshechu. But it means it's a halacha that it's totally in Mashiach. But Avada, they had no shaykhs to being a Kohen Gadol. It's not like all the Rishonim l'chayra that the Rishonim say that they had a din of a Kohen Gadol on that day. So the Sfarnai in Parshas Shmini there by Nadav and Avihu, he's the only one that doesn't say mamish like all the other Rishonim, and he says it stems with Reb Chaim's lashon. He says, "Afal pi shahayu amesim me'akrevim shemetam lahem kain hedyot hechmer al eila mipnei shahayu meshuchim." They're different because they were meshuach. He doesn't say that day they were like Kohanim Gedolim. So it sounds like Reb Chaim, that's just a din. So that's Reb Chaim's mahalach. Reb Chaim says, Avada, they were Kohen Hedyaitim. L'maisa, the Ramban, you really have to unpack, because the Ramban is in different places, he sounds like he's saying different things. By us, the Ramban says, Al pnei ar naviyim b'chayav. Zok the Ramban. In Parshas Bamidbar, Paragimel Pasuk Daled, Zok the Ramban, he says, what's the pasuk saying? Like we asked, what's Pasuk Pshat? Of course they became Kohen in the life of their father. Zok the Ramban, Rak ba'avur she'amar ha'kohanim ha'meshuchim shehayu gam heim ke'kohanim gedolim nimshachim kamayu b'chayev. The Ramban says, Elazar and Isamar were like Kohanim Gedolim, because it says ha'kohanim ha'meshuchim, which is where the Even Ezra was coming from. But he doesn't say they were Kohanim Gedolim like the Even Ezra. He says ke Kohanim Gedolim. They were like Kohanim Gedolim. The Ramban in Parshas Shmini, if you look at the Ramban in Parshas Shmini, Perek Yud Pasuk Vav, he expounds on this He says like this: V'nei bnei Aaron ha'kohanim ha'meshuchim aval pi shehem kohanim edyotam asadinam b'mei ha'miluim kedin kohen meshuach mochama l'dairis. They had a dinner like a kohen meshuach mochama, which has the halachas of a kohen gadol, but it can't be makav einin. And he says he fears ice. Ve'efsher sheyiyah zenoye kol yemeim be'Elazar Isamar sheyiyah dinam k'mashuach mochama ba'avur shenimshechu b'shemen ha'mishcha. Ve'yiyah zetam kishem mishchas Hashem aleichem. So the Ramban says that not that they were Kohanim Gedolim mamish. They were this halacha that we know. There's such a thing as a kohen gadol that's Mashuach Muhammad, that he's the one, he's nimshach with the Shemen HaMishcha. It's like an in-between kohen gadol. Zok the Ramban, that's what Elazar and Isamar were. They were this kohen Mashuach Muhammad. The Ramban in Parshas Sav, Parshas Pasuk Gid Aleph, there the Ramban says, he says something which the Chayr says to this. He says that Vanir Be'enai Ki loy haisa meshichas hakohanim biyitzika shemen al reisham, that the Elazar and Isamar did not get the pouring of the oil on their head. Ki loy nemar ze ela ba'aron. This was only said by Aaron, but it was not said by the banim at all. And he says, "V'yitachin shalei haisa ba'banim meshicha zulasi ha'azoyis shehiza mishemen ha'mishcha al banav abigdem." All they had was hazah. So the Ramban sounds like they did not have Mashiach. They like a Kohen Gadol, even like a Meshuach Muhammad here. They only had Hazah. So this would seem to be size of the other Rambans. And there's one more Ramban in Parshas Chukas, Perek Chaf, Pasuk Chavav, that the Ramban says that when Elazar took over for Aaron HaKohen, when they went to the Ma'ara, Zakta Ramban, V'havshed as Aaron es begadav, Heim Bigdei Kahuna Gedola. These are the Bigdei Kahuna Gedola, Shenis Rabba Bahem Ata Elazar B'nai, that Elazar, his son, now was becoming a Kohen Gadol with them. So the Briskerov in Zvachim in Kof Aleph is Medayik that from this Ramban that it sounds like that there was no Mashiach happening with Elazar. He didn't need Mashiach. He already had Mashiach. So from here it would sound like that there was a regular Mashiach, that Elazar had a regular Mashiach. Okay, so you have to know how to fa'en for these Rambans, but the Ramban seems to be saying a new shita that they weren't Kohen Gadols, they weren't Kohen Hadits, they were Kohen Mashuach Muhammad. They were this new thing. So I wanted to say that it could be that the 7 days of the Miluyim, where Aaron was Nimshach, because the Gemara in Yuma Daf Hemad Aleph says that there were 7 days of Mashiach. There were 7 days that you have to have the Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol has to have done to you. So in these 7 days is where Aaron HaKohen was the only Kohen Gadol, like we said, and the sons of Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, Isamar, did not have a Mashiach that day, and they wore the Daled Begadim. And on the 8th day is when they got the Mashiach and they got the Kohen Gadol, going back to those Rishonim. Because I found the Zeis Ranon, which is the Magen Avram, the Zeis Ranon says, he's Medayik in the Yalkut Shemaini. The Yalkut Shemaini says, Ein Moishchen, the Pasuk says, B'yomi Moshach Oisai. Zok the Yalkut Shemaini, Ein Moishchen Shnei Kohanim Gedolim Ke'echad. You can't be Moishech 2 Kohanim Gedolim at once. So the Zeis Ranon, the Magen Avram says, it's mashma from here, not like the Rambam that we said originally. It's mashma from here that you just can't be Moishech them at once. But Avada, you could have 2 Kohanim Gedolim at the same time. So it could be that for the 7 days of the Miluim, Aaron HaKohen was Nimshach, so only he was a Kohen Gadol and his sons were not. But on the 8th day, when they were Nimshach, because we didn't want to do the Mashiach on the same day, so therefore they became Kohen Gadols for that day. If you look at the Psukim, I tried to be ma'ayin in the Psukim, it stims a lot with a lot of different Pashup Shad in the Psukim, but then there's some Shverkeiten. But the Fizeh would answer two of our original kashas. We asked originally three kashas. We asked, and two of them were that the Psukim sound like that Nadav and Elazar Isamar wore Daled Begadim. They were not Kohanim Gedolim. And the Rambam says you're not allowed to have two Kohanim Gedolim at once. So it could be that, Vada, they wore Big Day Kain Hadiyah. That was for Shavas Yimei Miluim. But on the 8th day is when, like these Rishonim are saying, that's when they had a din of a Kain Gadol. But and the Rambam says you can't have two Kohanim Gedolim at once. That's the Rambam Shita, but there's the Medrash, like the Magen Avram's being Medayik from the Zeis Ranan, is that Avada, you could have two Kohanim Gedolim at the same time. So Lamaisa, we're coming out that there's 4 Mahalchim in what Elazar and Isamar, what was their halacha? There's Unzer Gemara, the Talmud Bavli, with the Gemara in Zvachim Kaf Aleph, the Gemara in Zvachim Kaf Beis, and like how Reb Chaim learned in Sefer, and like how the Sfarnai was Meduyik like Reb Chaim, that the Elazar and Isamar never had a din of a Kain Gadol. They were just Kain Hadyats. Simple Kain Hadyat. The Medrash Rabbah that says that the Nadav and Avihu were punished because they didn't wear a me'il, and all the Rishonim learn, the Das Keinim, the Cheskuni, the Rashbam, and learn that that only on the 8th day were they Kohanim Gedolim. Only on the 8th day of Shemini Simei Elohim. Then we have the Medrash Rabbah in our Parsha, which sounds like they were Mamish Kohanim Gedolim, because the Medrash says if a Tumah happened to Aaron, Elazar took over. If a Tumah happened to Elazar, Isamar took over. So it sounds like they were Kohanim Gedolim Mamish. And then we have the Naya Shita of the Ramban, that they had a din of Mashuach Muhammad. They were this in between. So Lefi what we're saying, it also answers our original kasha from the Sepharnai. The third kasha that we asked. We asked that the Sepharnai says Yarech say Aaron, right? And only Aaron HaKain was allowed to light the menorah because only he was the Kain Gadol. Only he was the Kain Gadol. What do you mean? Elazar and Isamar were also the Kain Gadol. But like we said, the Sepharnai is Meduik like Reb Chaim, that they were only Kain Hadyats. Elazar and Isamar were only Kain Hadyats. And really, the Sepharnai by us is mamish mashma. He does not say that like this lashon of the Even Ezra. He says like this in Parag Gimel Pasuk Gimel Zak the Sepharnai Hakehanim Amashuchim v'loi kara kain l'doires ki amnam loi nimshach achareim shum kain hedyet b'chaya kain gadol. There was never a kain hedyet that got a Mashiach. He says the reason why over here they got a Mashiach because or else they wouldn't have been kayanim at all. But Avada, he sounds like he's saying that the Mashiach was only to make them into a kain hedyet. So the Svarnei L'Shitase in Parshas Shmini and Parshas Bamidbar, Mamish makes sense what the Svarnei was saying in Parshas Emor. Why Dafke Yarech say Aaron? Aaron's the only Kain Gadol. Elazar and Isamar, they were only Kain Hadyat.